Well, good afternoon in the USA, ranging from the Pacific time zone, where I'm in Seattle, through Denver, where we have Jack Smith joining us in a moment, all the way out to the East Coast. Let's call it good afternoon. Over in Europe, good evening, and over in Asia, good early morning. So thank you for joining us. This is the MSP Tech Talk Series Spring Quarter, the second lecture, academic lecture, How to Be an MSP Vertical Edition. As many of you have figured out, we're going to double click into the absolute hottest vertical in North America, if not global markets. So let's get started. We're going to be joined in shouting out to Jack Smith. Boy, try finding him on Facebook or LinkedIn. That is a classic American name. There's a lot of Jack Smiths. This is the one who's the MSP in Denver, Colorado. And then Josh Weiss finishes a meeting down in Southern California at 12:30 Pacific, and he's going to pop in, and he's very active in this vertical and has some interesting insights that we're going to draw out from him. We're going to talk about why are we here? Important slide. A quick tip of the hat to professional services fundamentals. Not going to spend time on that. I'm going to talk about maturity and marketplaces, my recent trip to the Channel Pro SMB Summit in Chicago, the last foot of the whole supply chain, MJ BizCon next in New Orleans mid-June, a couple of knowledge nuggets, Jack and the Beanstalk, a review of our community, 420 MSP, a tip of the hat to the book, and I also want to share with you some information about some speaking opportunities I'm engaging in, and of course, your questions and answers along the way. Jenny Hallmark is in the radio control room and is going to handle the polling and the questions today since I'm live. So, why are we here? What I'm talking about is an opportunity to make what you are worth in a vertical where your pricing, quite frankly, is not questioned. And then work with clients you like. And so I want to set the table there that when you pick a vertical market and you develop subject matter expertise, or what I like to call domain expertise, that goes a long way towards make the kind of money that you want to, make the kind of money that you're worth. And I'm going to contrast that with some maturity issues on the next slide. Then work with clients you like. And I would offer, I'll even take a pay cut to work with clients I like. Jack from Denver, Colorado, please introduce yourself, your company, what line of work you're in. And I want to talk to you about working with clients you like, sir, because you nailed the cause marketing thing. We're going to bring that out for just a second. Jack, welcome. Who are you, sir?
Oh, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Jack Smith out of Denver, Colorado. One of the few Colorado natives I feel left here in Colorado. I've been doing this since 2001 here in Denver in a particular vertical, architecture,
Yep.
engineering, and contracting.
And that was called Autodesk,
And
one of your niches?
yep, that is
Okay.
definitely one of our niches. Why am I here? Good friends with Harry and very interested in what he's been doing over the last couple of years with this. And it is important. I agree, Harry, it is important to work with clients you like. I think when everybody first starts out, they're afraid they just want to work with anybody. And my years have proven one thing and taught me that the relationship is what lasts.
Yep.
And we're very vested in that. And so when you're invested in the relationship with somebody, it matters. And ultimately you end up with people you like working with.
And Jack, we're going to give us about another few days. I interviewed you, how your company participates in cause marketing. That's going to be on our sister site, Microsoft 365 Nation. So a different conversation. But let's talk about that because I think that's part and partial to working with clients you like. Give us an example of an upcoming event where you're donating some time, you're getting people excited to help one of your clients, and I believe the not-for-profit sector. Go.
Right. So what we've done this year, we started creating an initiative, a social awareness initiative. We've selected four typically nonprofit companies, and we are basically going to be their champion from an IT perspective, from a social media, from a social awareness perspective. One of them that we have coming up is a shelter, homeless shelter and lodging situation for transgenders, and women to get them off of the street and out of harm's way. Me and my staff will be planning, purchasing, cooking, serving, and of course eating with the residents of this village here next month.
Well, and again, I think it plays into my intent with this slide. Why are we here? So yes, we want to make what we're worth. We want to work with clients we like, and that strategy is in alignment with what you do. And then also, Jack, as you know, in fact, one of the reasons I wrote the book that I have on screen, and we'll talk about at the very end, but I do feel strongly in sending the elevator back down. I personally have benefited from the Seattle Miracle over the last 30 years. This is Seattle's golden age. And I feel a sense of obligation to send the elevator back down and help out others. But let's get going. Fundamentals, professional services, find your mind or grinder. So that's the outline of the book. Now, those that have tracked my work over 20 years know that a lot of my writings originate from Finder, Minder, Grinder. And Finder is get the business. Minder is manage the business, client relations, as well as your own practice. I would offer Carl Palachuk does a fantastic job with this standard operating procedures writings in this area. And then you see in my coffee cup, we have Grinder at the bottom, and it has a check mark next to it. Because Jack, I've never met someone in our space that has a problem doing the work.
No, that's absolutely true.
Quickly, Jack, where it's hard for one person in professional services to be all three, right? And I'm thinking, my brother's a career lawyer, and they had the handsome lawyer who was the finder. Wasn't the best legal mind, didn't care. My brother was the grinder, with all due respect.
Right.
Jack, how does your practice fit into this? Or are you one of these rare people right in the center of you're all three, finder, minder, grinder? Or how would you stack and rank your skill set, sir? This is an MSP.
Yeah, I am all three. And
Okay.
really what it comes down to is being able to balance each one so that each one of them is productive at the right time.
There we go.
Because there are times, right? There are times when you need to be one or the other versus the other.
Absolutely. Myers-Briggs taught me that, man, about the different personality types. So folks, I want to set the table as to why we're going to talk about the hottest vertical in North America, soon to be global, in a minute. Because yesterday, Larry Walsh, a well-respected analyst that is at the 2112 group. So if you just take the first part of that URL to the 2112group.com and look up yesterday's post on everyone is now a reseller. And this is about marketplaces. And quite frankly, this article scared me, and I put it into today's slide to motivate us to get into a lucrative niche where we're paid what we're worth and we like who we work with. Because marketplaces reflect the maturity of the MSP community. And so, you know, the feeling with a lot of vendors is let's just slap it up on a marketplace and let the customers do a double click and download. Maybe they can go direct, maybe they need an MSP, but it's a sign of maturity. And I would offer a disintermediation of the sort of, for lack of a better word, middleware role we play as an MSP between the ISVs, between the vendors, and so on. And Larry correctly identifies something I've known for a long time up here in Seattle, in the hallways and the pubs, about Microsoft is heading towards the marketplace mentality. Now, clearly Amazon set the gold standard on that, but you're now seeing the vendors go to a marketplace mentality. And Jack, I welcome your opinion because quite frankly, this scares the hell out of me as a sign of a very mature market for MSPs. What's your opinion? And Jack, you can disagree with me. That's fine.
Well, no, I mean, I don't, yeah, I don't think that I should disagree with you because you're right. You know, a lot of who used to be our vendors, right? Our kind of guys behind the curtain, are now out in front of the curtain standing right next to us. And the problem is they have more capital, they have more reach, and they have more resource. So we have to not pay attention to those guys standing to your left and right is suicide.
And again, a shout out to Larry Walsh, a friend of mine. He does excellent, excellent work. So let's talk Chicago, Chicago. And I have a few slides on this. So Channel Pro, and again, a shout out to Channel Pro. I'm going to get this up on screen, assuming you can see the Channel Pro magazine. I have a couple references to Channel Pro, our friends and yours. They had their summit in Chicago on May 2nd. Now, folks, get out your pad and write May 2nd. This is critical. This was our big reveal of our new community and my book. And so had a great reception, some great conversations, had one or two testy conversations I'll talk about later. But this is what it looked like. I was right next to Carl Palachuk out on the floor May 2nd. By the way, they have two more shows left this year, this fall, Channel Pro, SMB, their summits. Hope to see you there. Start September and I believe October. One of the speakers at the Channel Pro SMB Summit in Chicago on May 2nd was Luis Alvarez, and he is from Central California. So part of his coverage includes San Luis Obispo in Central California. It's lovely. It's where my two sons, one's out of Cal Poly, the other's still in Cal Poly. And Jack, they have, and I don't know the Latin phrase, I'm going to say hubris maximus, and that loosely translates to learning by doing. And it's kind of a funny joke because Cal Poly is a aerospace college, a technical university. It's not a liberal arts college by any stretch. So their Latin mission statement is learning by doing. And on the one hand, that's exactly what Luis has done in Central California. He had customers in the wine business and other lines of work that correlated very strongly to the cannabis business. And he's now built this, and you see his secret sauce. And I'm not going to show you any more of the deck. You can get the deck of this presentation from Luis. Super good guy, interviewed him. We'll have that up in just a couple of days. And you can learn more about him, but he learned by doing, right? That he had never done this before. He won a bid for a cannabis business client. And now in box number 2 to the right, now I'm the go-to guy in the cannabis business niche. I've won numerous cannabis business clients since then. I regularly win bids against physical security vendors. And finally, I've created a new category of business. I also have zero competition from other IT service vendors. Now, there's a downside to learning by doing, and I want to get the elephant out of the room. The joke at Cal Poly in San Luis Obispo is learning by doing does not extend to the typical college lifestyle after hours of partying. So they in no way are encouraging learning by doing. It's a tired old joke out there, but Jack, you and I have talked, and in no way as we explore this legitimate, legal, serious, cash-rich, well-capitalized vertical, in no way am I encouraging anyone to partake in any activities that they're not comfortable with, nor is Luis. But I had to kind of play off his location in Central California. His play is IoT in the cannabis business. And again, sign up at channelprosmb.com. You can get the deck. Let them know Harry sent you. I want to make sure we drive traffic to them. And Jack, if it makes sense, protect their copyright. We all want to play on a level playing field. Jack, quickly, with respect to breaking into this business, I suspect you're on the same pathway, right? That you want to learn a little bit about the business. That's why you're here. That's why I'm going to see you in a couple weeks. But I suspect you're going to go through the same behaviors. That makes sense. That you're going to get client number 1, and there's going to be a little bit of learning by doing. Is that fair?
Oh yeah, absolutely fair. And I mean, being in Denver and in Colorado here, I mean, it only makes sense for me to look into this vertical because it's all around us. And the attitude out here in Denver is, really quite open to it. And that's exactly what I expect to do. I expect to just kind of muddle my way through that first one, learn the lingo, learn the industry, and continue to learn whole different set of people.
Yeah. Hey, Jenny, before we go any further, since I kind of gave my sermon on how people should view this very serious industry and what they do on their own time is up to them, Jenny, can I have you bring up the poll question if you don't mind, because it helps me set the table. And Jenny, since I'm presenting, why don't we just leave that up for a few seconds, and then if you could tell me what the results are. But folks, while you're doing that, a couple of shows coming up. I always like to tell you that some upcoming shows, for example, Jennifer Hallmark has just gotten off the plane from pitch hitting out at Lenovo in Orlando. So Lenovo Accelerate, you're going to see some blogs on that later today. Mia Kate, an editor that has joined us, who was on the book, is still at Sage Summit, the accounting software Sage Summit in Atlanta. So she's still there till tomorrow. We got DattoCon coming up. We got some other things coming up. So Jenny, that's probably enough time for people to answer the question. Would you mind reading the results, please?
Sure. We've got 68% at recreational, 21% at medical only, and 11 opposed to legalization.
Okay, thank you, Jenny. Let's move on. Now, remember when I told you to take out a pencil and write down the term May 2nd? The reason I did, and Jenny, am I back on screen? Can you see the Illinois governor, please?
Yep, you're back on screen.
All right. So on May 2nd, actually it would have been May 1st, that night when I landed in Chicago, I was watching the local PBS station, the news station, PBS NewsHour, the local version for the Chicagoland area, and they had a conversation with people who are pro-legalization and anti-legalization for cannabis. As PBS does, they do a pretty good job of presenting both sides. And later that week, and it was on May 3rd. That's why I'm so picky about dates. May 1st, I heard of this, what you're seeing on the screen, that they were headed towards a Senate bill. A 300-page Senate bill was introduced on May 3rd to the legislature about recreational and medical legalization of cannabis in the state of Illinois. On May 4th, what you see on the screen is the Illinois governor resolved some political differences. And then May 5th, of course, was Cinco de Mayo. But what was interesting was that, Jack, there I was with my big reveal on May 2nd in a state that is technically not legal. And I saw two things. With this state Senate action, followed a couple days later by the governor reaching agreement with the opposition to move forward with this, you can imagine the interest level skyrocketed with the conversations we were having, right? Because it's like, well, I'd rather be early to dinner than late, as Mama always advised me to be. And then, Jack, it was also really cool that a lot of people had driven down from Michigan, and they were very interested in my book and conversation, because Michigan at the beginning of the year did go legal. But Jack, and you'll totally relate to this because we had it in the state of Washington, but it takes a year or two to actually implement. Just because it's legal on the books, it takes quite a while to implement the safeguards, the packaging, the protection, the supply chain, right, the tracking, the traceability, compliance. Don't get me started. And therein lies the opportunity. Go ahead, Jack.
Well, I was just going to say, I mean, even in Colorado here, where it's been here for a couple of years now, they're still struggling. Now the big push here in Colorado is all of the illegal growers.
Correct.
That sort of thing, where they're cracking down on them because it's a legitimate industry now. And a lot of people here in Denver think that just because it's legal here, they can grow it and sell it, and that's still not the case.
Correct. You got the gray market, the black market, and what we call the white market. And we, of course, would only encourage you to participate in the white market, as they say. And that's just a reference to being a legal market. Legal. Okay, so while I was in Chicago, another interesting conversation. So these are some individuals that I met at the leading conference in the industry. It's in November. It's called MJ BizCon, the fall edition. And this is a point of sale vendor that does point of sale repair, replacement, recycling, new. And Jack, they had just a few days before announced a niche in the cannabis dispensary industry for their point of sale expertise. And the reason I know that is I got an email from them because I had been at the November show doing my research for the book, 2 years of research to write this book. I got on their list, and then just days before they came out with this. Now I have an interview with them tomorrow afternoon, Thursday, that we will quickly post up on the 420 MSP site that I'm going to show you. But I did have a chance to chat with them in Chicago, and I thought this was cool because, guys, they're excited to talk to us, Jack, because they in no way see MSPs as competition. This is an old-timey cash register sales business. These people don't know what recurring revenue is. Thank you. They are
Right.
interested in talking to MSPs who know infrastructure, supply chain, have a little bit of business acumen. And I told the individuals at this company that, well, with all due respect, our MSPs, this is probably their weakest link. And Jack, I welcome your opinion. You know, have you spent time in point of sale? It always seems to be that's a little bit of an outlier for our community.
Yeah, I know. I agree 100% because, like you just said, we don't, or we have trouble seeing the MRR in that line. Really, it's you set it up and it works, and you leave it at that. And if it doesn't work, typically you just replace the little unit or whatever it is. It's more of a
Yeah.
break fix. Speaks to more of a break fix environment than anything else, I think.
Well, and I'll end on this. These were suit and tie guys. Okay, Jack. I mean, one guy was headed out to the golf course, right? I mean,
Right.
these are real business people. Let me tell you, it's just they have identified a very interesting way to position their practice. Next slide,
Well, I
please.
think too that
Yeah, go
we
ahead.
can be somewhat short-sighted. You know, being an MSP, you bring up a good point. I think that when you think about all of the amount of point of sale that's out there now, tap credit cards, it's actually we've all watched it evolve every time we go somewhere. And us being in the MSP realm, we just kind of don't notice it as it evolves because we're not interested in it. But now I'm starting to take a different look at it where it's getting a little more advanced in a way.
Yep. Jack, that's your slide. Forgive me. MJ BizCon next. So why don't you tell your story? I've done all the talking. That you, sir, were at an HTTG quarterly meeting in Dallas recently, and you sent me an email. Pick it up from there.
Oh, just that, yeah. I belong to HTG, which well, formerly HTG, right? ConnectWise owns them now, so it's evolved. And you know, we all come together. It's a peer group, and we all come together and talk about business and stuff. And I had spoken with Harry just before this, and had the conversation with a lot of my peers in the room, and the response I got was very mixed, which I thought was interesting.
Sure.
They're all
Sure.
pretty easygoing guys, you know, that whole sort of thing. But it was very interesting. You could almost tell who the person that had like whether it's a spiritual or an ideological type of opposition to it, you could tell just by the way they were listening to the conversation. Other people, kind of disappointingly, but good for me, I guess, was they don't take it serious. They don't look at it very serious. And to their credit, it's not legal in some of their states, so they don't feel like it really applies to them, which I
Yeah.
disagree with. I mean, I think what we're talking about here can easily transcend from one legal state to another without much issue. But
Yep.
overall, they were very interested in this new vertical that's kind of on the horizon. And I've told them I'll keep them in touch and abreast of what develops down in New Orleans. And actually, I have one of them to my group that's actually pretty close to New Orleans. I might talk to him about swinging by.
Yeah.
I think,
Yeah. And so, well, and so Jack, in all fairness, you reached out and asked what about this conference? And I said, anything
yep,
MJ BizCon is excellent. Okay, so sticking with the ConnectWise theme, if we can all agree that IT Nation is excellent, I believe it is.
Yep, I
This
believe it is.
is, yeah, this is excellent. And so the fall conference in Las Vegas that I went to as part of my research, 3 years ago when they started it at the Rio, where we used to have the good old timey SMB Nation fall conference, that's where they started. And
Yep,
and
the
the
Rio.
first year they had 7,500 attendees, and then they moved it to the convention center, and they had 15,000 in year two. Last year they had 30,000 attendees and over 1,000 vendors, 1,000 booths. I can't wait to see what November brings. My tummy would tell me now they're going to start to hit the law of large numbers, but I would suspect they'll hit 50,000 attendees this year. So this is basically their spring show, if you will, spring fall. And I have not been to this one, so this is a smaller show. I'm going to probably peg it at a few thousand attendees, a few hundred booths. And so what Jack and I have done, and I've held off Jack on the Airbnb. I mean, we're all SMB entrepreneurs, and so Jack and I are going to get an Airbnb, but I've held off because if there's anybody here today that would like to join us and stay at SMB house, we can do an entire house, right? We can get the whole darn house and share the Uber over to the event. And we can have a lot of fun and knowledge transfer along the way. And Jack, if you don't mind, I just wanted to kind of call out the talk you and I had last weekend, starting to double click down on Airbnbs, but you were interested in accelerating your knowledge of this particular
Hmm.
vertical and I take it as a compliment, but you said by shadowing me.
Correct.
I mean, with all
I
due
mean,
respect.
yeah, absolutely. Right, because I wanted to make sure that, all of us find, time is a finite thing for all of us that are running an MSP. And when you go to look into a new vertical, new offering, you want to make sure that the limited time you have is spent very well. And given your past 2 years of investigation into this industry, I thought who better than to, be the fly on your shoulder, if you will.
Yep.
And you were gracious enough to say absolutely. So I thank you for that. And yeah, I mean, I'm excited about it. I really am. I'm excited. I found this conference just by my own. I didn't realize you had it listed in the back of the book, so I hadn't gotten that far yet. But I was very interested, and it struck me the same way, Harry. It struck me as a very organized event, very kind of have their stuff together kind of deal, and that's what attracted me to it. And so yeah, I'm absolutely excited to go learn this lingo, learn this industry, and be able to make an educated decision as to whether this is an industry that I really want to get into. I don't At this
Yeah.
point I don't see any reason why not, but you never know what you find.
Yeah, and more to come on that. So folks, if you would like to do that, at the end of the slide deck, I have my personal email address, harryb@smbnation.com. Shoot me a note if you want to stay, if you want to go to the conference, that's on you. But if you want to help do some cost sharing with Animal House, I mean, SMB Nation House, let me know, because Jack, that's a double dip. I mean, we boy
Oh
howdy,
yeah.
I think fun is going to find us in New Orleans. I don't think we have to look too far for fun.
Yeah, I don't know how it couldn't.
All right, moving on. Some knowledge nuggets. And this is one of the reasons why I took the survey just a few slides ago, because I want to respect everybody's position on this. And I, for quite frankly, I have some experience in this vertical. And so here's where I sit today. And I'm not going to repeat the two other webinars we've already done on this topic in 2018. I'm going to show you where those are. So, help me help you, and go watch those two webinars that talked about the science and the marketing. So I want each webinar we do to be unique. And so here's my knowledge nuggets for today. Number one is palliative care. So everybody on this call, in all likelihood, has a relative, a friend who has cancer. Okay, that's just kind of the world we live in. Palliative care is pain management. It can be taken one of two ways. It can be viewed as active pain management during treatment. It can be viewed as pain management in a hospice-like situation. And it doesn't just have to be cancer, but it may be people who, are done with the chemotherapy. And so that's where a doctor comes in who's a palliative care doctor, and their job is to minimize pain. And so I spoke with one recently as part of my research, Dr. Bader, and a couple of things, Jack. So first of all, he is allowed to talk about cannabis. And this is a really key point, because when my dog Astro, the mascot of SMB Nation, unfortunately we lost him last early December at the ripe age of 14 and a half years old, great dog. I was going to the dispensary to get CBD dog biscuits. And there's a whole science behind that, because he was under 40 pounds. He had to break the biscuit in half. So there's all that, right, about the drug cocktail and all that. But Jack, what was really interesting was the attending veterinarian. She told me she was not allowed to discuss that with me. Okay, that no, sir, you're on your own. I cannot talk to you about that. And there's a couple reasons. One is THC, the psychoactive component of cannabis, is toxic to dogs, right? So you can appreciate the veterinarian didn't want to go there. CBD is not toxic, and it brings joint relief, pain relief, appetite, nausea control, anxiety control. Back to Dr. Bader. So what Dr. Bader said about palliative care, Jack, and this is where, if you get into this business, I want you to lead with healthcare, right? I would highly recommend you get into the business that way instead of a variety of attack vectors. So with palliative care, number one, Dr. Bader said, is anti-anxiety, because people who have cancer build up a great deal of anxiety. So that's first and foremost the use of CBD. And it could be a hybrid. Maybe they want to have an intoxication effect. That's up to them. But the idea is that the limited research they've done in the field research they have, and I'm going to talk about research on another slide, they know that cannabis does not hurt or interact badly with other cancer drugs. Okay, so that's critical. Number two would be appetite. So we used to call it getting the munchies. And then number three would be anti-nausea. And Jack, what I found with some of those polling numbers we saw in conversations you've had and I've had, pretty much everybody can get behind medicinal use. Okay, that's a fairly low bar to cross. When you introduce the psychoactive element called THC, that's a whole nother conversation. I'm not even sure, I don't necessarily want to spend a whole lot of time in that conversation. I'm here to help you get paid what you're worth and work with clients you like. Okay, that's why we're here. Next knowledge nugget, the Seattle housing crisis. So I believe we had, Jenny, you said 11% of the people are in opposition to legalization. That's great. I had a gentleman come by the booth in Chicago, not surprisingly. And he said the reason Seattle has a homeless problem is because of the legalization of cannabis. And I said, well, I don't know. I might point to the closing of mental health facilities in the 80s and 90s as one of the causes that put the deinstitutionalization that put people on the street. And I tried to have a conversation about, well, sir, so you're telling me if we take it all to the black market, okay, let's just talk this through. So if we go back to the black market, the housing crisis goes away, the homelessness issue goes away in Seattle. And I said, dude, we're just going to have to agree to disagree. Okay, that's fine. But Jack, what was cool is we had a professional, legitimate, serious conversation. And Jack, I'll take that all day long. Right, I'll have those conversations all day, every day. A couple. Well, and I don't know if you have any thoughts. What you've seen in Denver, sir, you spent a lot of time in
a little bit.
Seattle.
Yeah, as far as Denver goes, once it became full-on legal here, we did see an increase in the homeless population, simply because people were coming from other states to hear.
Ah,
And this is what I was reading. You know, I'm not an expert on this, but this is what I had read in the papers and that sort of thing, where the majority of them were also young. They were, you know, 18 to 27. There was a large surge in that population here. And then as other states started to adopt it and that kind of thing, they actually saw a little bit of a decrease because unlike other states, I mean, yeah, it's beautiful here, but it does get cold and it does snow. And, you know, so Denver itself is struggling with its homeless population to a large degree, and it's going to be fought out in the mayoral election here, the runoff here. So I don't think anybody can point a finger at it specifically and say that's why, but I do believe that there is a little bit out there to justify it.
fair enough. Now, folks, we're just past midpoint. Jenny, let me know when Josh Weiss from Southern California joins. I know he's finishing a meeting at 12:30. Oh, hey, Josh. Okay. You know what? Let me get through the next two examples, Josh, and then I want to do a shout out to you. Thank you, my friend. And Jenny, do we have any questions before I get into two recent articles on CNN and the New York Times? Any questions we can answer now?
No, not at this time.
All righty. That means I did my homework. Um, so what we have on CNN, folks, you'll need to search on this. Cannabis Goes Mainstream on CNN. And what that's about is how almost overnight the industry has become top of mind over at Motley Fool. If any of you guys do stock investing or watch CNBC, it's become top of mind overnight. This article goes into that just out of the blue, this all of a sudden has become a mainstream conversation in the last several months, which I am excited about because I spent, you know, a heck of a lot of time researching this book. And I believe in timing, market timing. So it's great that we're having the conversation now. You are in no way too late. And then you have an article in the New York Times about the number of jobs being created in this vertical. And again, search on this, read it for yourself. But what was interesting about that article is it brought back memories of when I worked for Microsoft in 89 and 90. I might have been there 91. I was on the Excel 3.0 team with the macro interpreter. So we were translating Lotus macros to Excel macros. And in a building down the way was a new product called Visual Basic. Okay, so that should be, you know, a little bit scratch your head on that one to go back in time to a thing called Visual Basic way before Visual Studio. And what they did, Josh and Jack, was they took the Seattle paper, the Sunday paper, and they taped. In the old days, there were things called employment ads in the Sunday paper. And they taped the ads from the Sunday paper on the walls of the hallway and highlighted wherever it said Visual Basic. So a Visual Basic developer, Visual Basic experience. And what they found, this was very crude analytics, but what they found is employment is a predictor of the strength of a software application, of a niche, of a vertical. And that's basically what this article is saying. And if you go to Indeed, I'll show you an example in the book is some research I did by going to Indeed and doing a geo query on the word cannabis and coming up with like 13,000 job openings. We have a gentleman on the line today who's a marketing director for an ISV in Redmond, Washington called Dauntless. And when I reviewed the Series A documents from Dauntless recently, end of year last year, where they have risk factors and all this stuff about being an investor, they claimed, I believe, but this sector has created 88,000 jobs. And so what we're looking for out of that article and the CNN article is if you're going to pick a niche, for darn sure make sure it's healthy, okay? Because there's nothing worse than picking a niche that dries up. And Jack, I don't know if you saw that, not to put you on the spot, but with your time schlepping and repping Autodesk in architecture and construction, I've always heard architects go, they're like a cork. They go up and down with the tide.
Oh, it's funny you say that because as you were talking, that's exactly what I was thinking about back in 2001, and then the subsequent
Yeah.
recession in 2007 and 8. We witnessed a lot of single niche, specialty niche architects completely dry up and go away
Yeah.
in both of those times.
Yeah. It's brutal. Markets are brutal. Moving on. I want to talk to you about Jack and the Beanstalk. So if you go to 420 MSP, we're going to review it in just a moment, our site. This is a piece I did, and so stick with me, you guys. This photo, that's my thumb. Those are my fingers, and that's a barcode, and that's a stock, okay? And what it is it's the only federally authorized research facility in the world, and it's in South Seattle down by Costco. So Jack, I know you're a fan of Seattle University, so this would be about 5 or 6 miles south on the way to the airport. As you might imagine, they had cameras. They had what's that wire you put on top of fence so bad guys don't climb in at night?
Razor wire.
Yeah. I mean, Jack, it was the real deal. Hey, speaking of Jack and the Beanstalk, Jack Smith, there we go. And so, folks, this is where we want to get our geek on. This is why you want to be excited about this industry from an MSP point of view, as well as just your own reckoning with the industry. So let's start with the MSP point of view. That barcode that I'm holding in that photo, Jack, that translates, and I don't know how well this is going to show up. I can't see myself, but this is a retail edible package called bonbons, okay? Chocolate little bonbons, indica, typically used for sleep aid. And what you have here, to the extent I can get it to the camera, you have a pretty sophisticated barcode. And what that means is there's actually three of them, 1, 2, 3. And it's called seed to sale traceability and compliance. And so that barcode of my thumb would effectively appear right here on the right. And then you go to the processor, and then you go to the retailer. And what that does from a geek point of view is this creates an incredible technology opportunity to track that at every single stage with an ERP type system, a supply chain management program. And Jack and Josh, as you well know, this doesn't happen on its own. And the audience we're dealing with, the people that run the dispensaries, even the processors and the producers, so growers, manufacturers, and retailers, they're not necessarily the best business people. And Josh, since you're in the segment, I'm going to bring that out from you in just a sec. Let me finish my example. I announced my book at South by Southwest in Austin, Texas in mid-April, mid-March. 300,000 people, can't be wrong. And I had a conversation with Jack, what you alluded to, and our polling data shows that 11% of people who are ideologically opposed to the legalization of cannabis. And in this case, it was a mom. And I get that, and totally has kids. We had a good conversation. And I said, here's the deal, is that these barcodes give us the ability to recall. They give us, in case of molds, mildew, pesticides, like the Roundup settlement that's going on right now, the multi-billion-dollar Roundup settlement. How about romaine lettuce? The recall on romaine lettuce is another example. But not only can we do a recall, and we can trace it, we can also tax it. And just to rewind a couple slides, the reason this is passing by the governor of Illinois is they are viewing right here, right now, the legalization of cannabis is strictly a revenue play. They have a huge budget shortfall. Jack, state of Washington now pulls $1 billion in revenue and tax. I'll leave that hanging out there. But by the end of the conversation with the mom in Austin, Texas at South by Southwest, she at least understood that if we go back to the black market and we have a problem like fentanyl deaths in a city one weekend, I was at Philly or Detroit, there's no way in hell we can do a recall. There's no way in hell we can track it. And all we can deal with is the emergency room at that point. And then finally, on that whole topic was packaging and child-proof packaging and safety issues. So when we put it in the right context, I don't know if I convinced her, but we sure had an adult conversation. Josh, I want to bring you in. This is as good a time as any. You, sir, were one of the early, you and Jack bought my book early. Thank you. You came back at me. You came back at me with a couple questions. Thank you. But you were actually already doing a couple of the key things I recommend in the book, and that was go to meetups. So let's talk about that. Then I want to talk about what else you're doing.
Yeah. I mean, as far as the meetups, actually, the next one is tonight for anybody in LA. I've for about 6 or 7 months now, either me or my business development guy have been going to a group called the Southern California Cannabis Business Investment Group, SCCBIG. Mm-hmm. They actually do most of their promotion on Meetup. They're pretty good for the central Los Angeles. My company is just outside of downtown LA. I know there's some groups in Orange County. There's groups in the Valley. I think there's probably like 4 or 5 groups like this one, but this one's been around for 5 or 6 years. So they go way back in terms of the.
It's quite a large membership, up in the thousands, as I saw.
They have a huge membership, and their events are bringing in maybe 150 people. They're very engaged people, very curious people. I do a lot of business networking, and most of it feels kind of boring and forced. This group, everyone you meet is like very, very interested. They all stop. This is our first month in 6 months. We don't have a table. But when we have our table, people stop by, people ask questions. 2 months ago, I gave a maybe 15-minute presentation with a colleague of mine from the Bay, who I also introduced to you. So basically, between him and me, we're really trying to build up the practice. But we gave a 15-minute talk mostly about cybersecurity in the cannabis industry.
Yeah.
A little bit on tech infrastructure. Usually when I meet people at these events, if I say we do IT, they don't even know what that is. So I say in the context of cannabis, generally what we do is turnkey technology infrastructure from a internet network camera perspective, and we do cybersecurity and compliance. So those are like the 2 major areas that we can hit. And so we got up there and we talked about it. We didn't even have any slides. But we talked about, the first U.S. version of GDPR is coming to California in 6 months. And so we told them, hey, like, you guys got to be ready. Not only is your industry already very complicated and compliant, but in 6 months, this is coming for real. Yeah. I spoke to the guy that organizes the meetup, and he said, I bet you 95% of this room has never even conceptualized what you're saying, isn't even aware that it's a thing. We met someone who runs a group of about 10 project managers who are helping people get licensed and compliant. Now, we actually learned some interesting lessons that I can get into, because this guy said, hey, you should come down to Long Beach and you should do a lunch and learn with the team about this security stuff, because it's a major pain point for our clients. That lunch and learn ended up being a total waste of time for reasons that are part my fault, part their fault.
Okay.
But the bottom line is, this guy who's out there, all they do is help people get legal. He said, we don't know what the hell this is about. My project managers don't know what this is about. And I know this is a problem for our clients. Now, if he was actually a professional organization, I think it would have been a great lunch and learn. But that said, what I'm seeing in LA, anyway, LA is one of the first ones. I know that you work, more with Colorado and Washington, Harry, but LA has been on this journey for a long time too. And, as someone who's been, going into these dispensaries for 6 or 7 years, like, they started out like just some weird, dirty rooms.
Yeah.
Like the people I would have bought weed from in high school. And now they're turning into these professional operations. But it's been really interesting to watch it develop for so long and watch it professionalize over time. And to realize that at one of the most professional meetups in LA in terms of these investments, that no one's thinking about cybersecurity. Well, I think one of the lessons I learned is I'm not trying to go after the small dispensary owners because they're not even going to have the money to invest in cybersecurity. But
Yeah,
there's a lot of sort of defining the niche in terms of who can actually afford these services, and then just writing up some really good materials to just educate the people that can't afford it. But
yeah,
it's booming, and obviously, we've done some work helping my Bay Area colleague build manufacturing facilities in LA for oil, right? And those guys have the money. They got multi-sites across the country, across the West Coast, building facilities to manage extraction.
yeah. Okay, so that's what we call it, the processor, or yeah, processor level. Yep, yep.
And that's
Okay.
that's more what I'm interested in, is like chains of dispensaries and processors.
Yeah, I agree.
And I have a lot of friends that are farming up in Northern California, and those guys can't afford it either. But it's just, I know a lot of people in various places in the industry, and I think as I build out these services for my MSP, right now we're really in the networking phase. And
Sure.
we've gone into dark web scans for people, and everyone's personal address is showing up on the dark web. And so it's like the people are interested, the people are uneducated, and our goal right now is just to become the people in the LA community that are talking about this.
Yep. And Josh, I didn't do a very good job. Quickly introduce yourself properly, the name of your MSP, and then I have one more question for you.
Yeah, so my MSP is called LA Creative Technologies. We've been in business for about 10 years. We've been a pure play MSP for about 5 years. We work with architects, nonprofits, and people in a sort of widely defined creative scope. I'm a DJ. My network in LA is very full of creatives and cannabis people.
And my last question's a friendly, because remember, you pulled me up on stage at the Continuum conference in Las Vegas. But for the life of me, I can't. What was your speech at Continuum that fall, about 20 months ago?
That fall was about, usually I can't even remember the topic, but usually what I speak about is scalability as an MSP.
I think it was. Yeah.
Oh, you know what I was talking about? And
Go ahead.
when I told you up, I was talking about in that talk how to speak to your clients like a business advisor.
That's right. That's right.
So I pulled you up to ask you some on the fly business, sort of business questions.
Yeah. Yeah, you did.
And just to let the folks here know, one of the things that I do now is I have a coaching course about how to use Continuum's help desk, because Continuum isn't great at teaching. So everything I do is about outsourcing, partnerships, scalability, and then, how to be a sort of creative, kind of out of the box MSP.
Well, and I'll move on now, but you hit on a couple of points. One is scalability. So folks, given the chance to get a redo, right? We had Small Business Server, which is my bias. And what I'm here today to say is we have a 10-year run ahead of us. This is a redo. And there's a couple things you might want to think about. One would be scalability, that I certainly learned later in the MSP maturity model. And that's why you're seeing so much consolidation right now in the traditional MSP community, are scalability issues. The one-man band just can't make it with the new cloud margins. So we got scalability. And then Jack, a conversation you and I were having this last weekend had to do with, and Josh is tapping on it, is being a trusted business advisor to these people who were formerly in the black market. They're not organized. They're naturally paranoid and suspicious. And once you walk the walk and talk the talk, Jack, there's actually a chance to almost be a management consultant to these guys.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can see that. A large piece of our business is exactly that. We're constantly having those business level conversations. I teach my techs to do it. I teach all of my staff to do that. So I can absolutely see the need for that.
And Josh, go ahead and pitch in on that topic.
Yeah, I mean, what was I about to say? I had something I wanted to say, and then I forgot.
Well, but you're already business coaching. I mean, you're going to these meetups, you're kissing babies and shaking hands, you're talking. You're already doing it. You're already doing it.
That's great. You're doing. we're doing that stuff in both in the cannabis space and the architecture space. We're getting to it in the nonprofit space. I sat with a nonprofit prospect last week. They've been around for 6 years. They're one of the most visible organizations in Los Angeles. I sat with 5 members of their executive team. They had never once thought about security. They've never had IT. They were in a co-working space, so their network is managed, and that's it. They had no onboarding process, no offboarding process, and it was really great to talk to them that, okay, your goals are get more participants in what you're doing and raise more money to fund what you're doing. And all this stuff that we're talking about here, you need a new website, you need a new CRM, you've never thought about security. So let's prioritize these things, the roadmap, and then you go ask your funders for the money to pull this stuff off. Right.
Yep.
So yes, we're doing it all the time. And in cannabis specifically, even at that lunch and learn that was certainly not productive of my own time, those 10 project managers had never thought about security before. The company itself had no two-factor authentication. They were blown away at the concept of how much information they were managing, and they had zero concept of security. And
right.
So yeah, it's really amazing what you can pull out with a conversation in an hour or two from people that they're just not thinking about at all.
Yeah, finder, minder, grinder, professional services basics. Okay, so on the screen, I have the 420 MSP site, and I think I can hop over to it. Let's give this a shot, folks. Yep, I think I can do this. And I want you on your other screen, my permission to go to 420msp.com, and a couple of things stand out for our purposes today. Hopefully the site's laid out. This is where we update the book. Because we're in a dynamic business, everything happens at the vault. And I want to point out 2 things in the vault. We call it the good stuff. The webinars. Early on in this presentation, I talked to you about catching up, because what I'm not going to do is I'm not going to have a conversation twice with you about something I've already presented. So you need to invest in yourself, and again, help me help you. But in particular, I want you to look at these 2 webinars right here. So Cannabis Industry Opportunities for MSPs, summer of 2018. The gentleman in the middle is Mr. Bouchard from Kirkland, Washington, who had a booth at a show in Seattle and is in this segment. And then we had a fall webinar that was sort of the double click down into the nature of the industry. We made some distinctions at the science level between industrial hemp, CBD, THC, stuff you just kind of need to know. Here's a slide on the history of cannabis. Both of these are 90 minutes. This had to do with marketing approaches, including the meetups and so on. So I want you to start with those 2 webinars. Then you can compound it with a conversation I had with a Portland, Oregon network about the book itself. And then finally, Carl Palachek, my friend and yours, he brought out some interesting conversations about this whole motion at this podcast. That, my friends, are the webinars. Now let me show you the videos. We're going back to the vault, and you can do this on your own, but I just want to highlight a couple of things. So this is one I want to highlight. We have a couple more we're posting up. Josh, I'll be interviewing you in the near future, so we'll be getting you up here as well. But this is a very interesting one of a CPA out of Bend, Oregon, who happened to pick up a couple of clients in the legal cannabis industry. And he has a very interesting perspective on taxation, compliance, regulation. For example, he makes a couple of radical comments because he's now been in the space for a while, has a lot of experience. And he said, you can be in the black market. I don't want to talk to you. You can be in the white market, the legal market. I do want to talk to you. But he said, whatever you do not want to be in the gray market. And the gray market is between the two. And we just saw a manufacturer or processor busted in Southwest Washington who made edibles. They were peanut butter cups, and they were doing great in the legal market and had a stellar reputation. They're called Hanu, and that's turtle in Hawaiian. And they, Josh, they followed the shiny lure, and they started selling into the gray market. And what do you think happened with the compliance and traceability tools we have today on inventory? One guess, what happened?
They didn't get installed properly. They didn't get used properly.
They got shut down. They got shut down. You will get busted in this industry if you misbehave. And folks, that to me is why we're here, right? As MSPs, we are here to help with supply chain compliance, traceability, regulation, taxation, and so on. At the end of the day, that's the business purpose. So I encourage you to look at that video. We have some silly videos from South by Southwest where I double click down into the book. Several more videos to come. Let's go back to the presentation.
Harry, be silly, really?
Yeah, I had a little fun. By the way, if any of you guys want to do Animal House, I mean SMB Nation House next year at South by Southwest in Austin, let me know. I'd love to have you. So, folks, a pitch on the book. A little humor. Josh, to your point about being silly, the book is free. Okay, this is the book. The book is free. You just have to pay for the pages. Okay, and I always like to overprint the cover because it makes a great handout. But more importantly, it overcomes an objection to reading. And I saw this in the small business server era. So you can see my Bragg bookcase right to the my left of the book is one of the best ones I ever did was Small Business Server 4.5 in 21 days. To the right are the best practices. And people would come up and go, oh, I know all this, or I could do this. And I'm like, absolutely. In fact, here's the cover. Go ahead, start typing, right? No problem, start typing. Or you can pay me a modest sum of money and you get this. Okay, so you get the pages. And what I would like to offer is that this is 2+ years of research. Some folks know I don't know if I disappeared. I don't know if I went radio silent, but I certainly turned the bow of the ship the last couple of the years with the retirement of Small Business Server. And this book is here because of you. What you were asking me was, what the heck do I do now that Small Business Server is gone? And this is the result of my research, my 21st book. It's on the shelf. It's available for purchase over at 420 MSP. With all due respect, it's the only book in the world on this topic. So cannabis technology for MSPs. That's exactly where I was in the early 2000s. There were 2 books in the world on SBS 2000, the Microsoft Resource Kit and My Best Practices book, and I wrote both of them. And if we know anything from Seattle in that era, it's Microsoft taught me it's wonderful to have a monopoly. And I would encourage you to do the same with your practice in the cannabis space. This book will be interactive. It's updated with vids. Finally, go to your control panel. If you can help me, because I'm here to help you, I'll take your calls and emails anytime. We are a community. You can help me. If you don't mind going to your control panel, and the panelists can do this as well, go to handouts on your control panel for GoToWebinar. And if you would download my speaker baseball card. So what I did after finishing the book is I designed 2 speeches that are intended to be a keynote speech. They can certainly be a breakout session, and I can also put together custom content for other speeches. So even if you are not interested in my book, but you would like to continue to support the community, help me keep the doors open so I can help you, if you could be so kind as to download my baseball card, as you go to conferences and you talk to ISVs and other players in the industry, I would appreciate your referral for a speaking engagement on the cannabis technology matter. And that takes us to the questions. This is the time to ask your questions. We have given it our best here today. Obviously, thank you for attending. Visit the site, register at the site. Even if the book doesn't make sense for you today to buy, you will see $50 coupon codes once you sign up as a community member. Email me, harryb@smbnation.com. In particular, email me if you are interested in going to the MJ BizCon Next conference in mid-June with Jack Smith and I will get a larger Airbnb, so we all have our privacy, but we have just a little bit of Animal House fun in New Orleans for a couple of days. Josh, what was that?
What's the date on that? MJ BizCon?
Yeah. So Josh, I know you were on a call. Let me just revisit that. That's actually that's a question that I'm going to answer. So Josh, MJ BizCon is the category killer leading conference in our industry. It's serious. In November, where I will expect to see you and your partner, because it's a short drive, is in Las Vegas, the third week in Las Vegas. 30,000 attendees, 1,000 booths. This is the spring show, and this is the spring show in New Orleans, mid-June. Jack is already joining me. We have Josh, if your schedule allows.
I wish I didn't have 2 events already. I wish I didn't have 2 events already that week, but I'll definitely see you in that one.
So folks, that's almost all I got. Jenny, I'm going to turn it back to you. Maybe we prepared so well. I take pride in the research I do when I write a book. So if that pride has been exhibited and we don't have questions, I get it. Jenny, what say you?
We currently don't have any questions, so we can give everybody back a little bit of their time.
All righty. Well, folks, thank you so much for attending. Feedback is always wanted, welcome. Critical feedback is the breakfast of champions. Jack, I'm going to see you in just a few weeks. Josh, inevitably, I'll see you soon, sir, down in Southern California.
Yeah, also I'll see you on Friday here on this fine interview series.
Yes, sir. And Jenny in the radio control room just got off the plane from Lenovo Accelerate in Orlando and rushed to find a quiet spot to run the webinar. Thank you, Jenny. Folks, have a great day.